next up with excursion into the Slovak wilderness together with Vlado Vancura, who is here right now with us. Hi, Vlado.
Hi, hello everybody.
Hi, welcome. So yeah, let's start. I will guide you together with everybody through the presentation and we'll listen to your exciting stories.
Okay, thank you very much for introduction and hi everybody and good afternoon. As you notice, it is actually very great pleasure for me to be here again with you. This is my third presentation after first two on Monday, where I focus a little bit on wilderness quality standard of Europe and then a wilderness network in Europe. In this my presentation in the next 30 minutes, I will shortly introduce wilderness and wilderness potential in my home country, Slovakia. For your information, all pictures you are going to see in the coming 30 minutes are basically illustrating the wilderness and wilderness potential of these countries. Okay, thanks. Can you, yeah, this is my slides. You have seen it already likely. My short introduction, forestry background versus nature conservation and nature management, and a focus on the wilderness in the last 25 or more than 30 years. Good, thank you. This is 5 chapters of small blocks I am going to focus in my following presentation. First of all, let's have a look a little bit very shortly on a wilderness in Europe. In Europe, due to history and human impact, only very small fragments of wilderness actually survived because of impact and impact of the human. Wilderness has, however, a long tradition in Europe. Nevertheless, the word wilderness has not been always used like today it is. In the past several decades, instead of wilderness, people use nature or strict reserves, which actually, regarding the quality standard, fit very well to the wilderness, what we know today. Thank you. Since human-occupied Europe, wilderness has dramatically decreased because of pressure and because of millennia of the history of the human impact in Europe. And the wilderness survive only in the very remote corners, such as mountains, remote rivers, or inaccessible land. And therefore, wilderness restoration has become a particularly important element or activity, which is very relevant specifically for Central Europe, with a lot of good experience, particularly in the last 15, 18 years. Thank you. Let's visit in the following slides some well-protected areas in Europe with spontaneous wilderness self-restoration process, which can be already follow up and explore in many European countries. Let's focus on the Carpathian Mountains in this presentation. Thank you. The Carpathian Mountains are mountains range forming arc stretching throughout all Central and Eastern European countries. Roughly, it is a 1,500 kilometers long mountain range, and it is the third longest European mountain range stretching in the central part of Europe. Thank you. It stretches over the 7 countries like Czech, Slovakia, Hungary, Poland, Ukraine, Romania, and also Serbia. There are large fragments of the wild and less developed land survive to the present days because of its remoteness and less intensive economical development, particularly in the last 20, 30 years. Thanks. The Carpathians provide habitat for the largest European population of herbivores and carnivores. And very specific and very unique position of Carpathian Mountains is because of carnivores, native population of brown bear, wolves, and lynxes. Thank you. Wilderness has been protected on a purpose for more than 100 years as a refuge or as an example of the wild land. Thanks to this, large fragments of wilderness in Carpathians can be found in many corners of these mountains. Thank you. The famous largest wilderness in Romania is located inside the Retezat National Park. It is very remote, difficult to access, wild terrain with a minimum infrastructure such as trails, gravel roads, or simple tourism shelters for the visitors. Thank you. Another good example representing the Carpathian wilderness, it's a Carpathian Biosphere Reserve, Gorgania Reserve, or Sinevir National Nature Park in Ukraine, in the eastern part of the Carpathian Mountain Bowl. Thank you. Fragments of wilderness fitting to European wilderness quality standard can be obviously also found, and they are scattered in Poland or Czech Republic. But let's focus now particularly on Slovakia. Thank you. So, wilderness in Slovakia. Let's have a look. We must keep in mind that at least 5% of Slovakia should be without a human intervention. This is a slogan. This is a sentence in my country in the last few years very popular, because that becomes, and that was implemented, accepted also by the government of Slovakia, Ministry of Environment. And that's a long-term ambition actually to create 5% of Slovakia without any interruptive or extractive use of land inside the mountains. Thank you. The largest piece of wilderness in Central Europe and also obviously in Slovakia is located inside the oldest national park in Slovak, Tatra National Park. The two valleys, Silent and Koprova Valley, with a size circa 8,000 hectares, has been protected since the Second World War. This is an area which is still very good homeland for bears, lynx, wolves, and they live here almost among other endangered species of flora and fauna. Thank you. Thank you. Another piece of wilderness can be found in the largest protected area of Slovakia, Low Tatra Mountains. Oh, yeah. The size of proposed Skalka wilderness, that's a potential wilderness area which is preparing for the international audit. It's covering or offering circa 2,500 hectares of wilderness with additional potential in the coming years to expand for another 300 hectares. The proposed aim is to protect rare fragments of the wild nature with many spontaneous rewilding processes in this remote corner of the Low Tatra Mountains. Thank you. Very well-known piece of wilderness is also embedded in the Slovak Paradise National Park, which is situated in the middle of Slovakia and protects a unique network of the limestone canyons, as you can see on a picture, and gorges carved in the limestone plateau. The challenge is obviously how to manage this protected area with a very complex mandate structure. The new management plan, which has been recently approved, agreed and approved the new park zoning in coordination with the requirements of the local stakeholders and landowners to effectively protect this area because of rich biodiversity, because of rare karst phenomena, but also, which is very new for this area as well, remnants of the wilderness fitting to the European wilderness quality standard. Thank you. Besides the large fragments of wilderness scattered in existing large protected area in Slovakia, there is a still number of smaller areas with a potential wilderness, which are scattered all over Slovakia, particularly in the mountainous region. This area where spontaneous natural processes are already occurring for several decades can be found scattered all over the area, all over the mountains, and the spontaneous nature processes in some of them are already running for several decades. Thank you. So let's focus again inside of Slovakia. Let's focus on wilderness in Tatra Mountains. Thanks. This protected area consists of several very important wilderness areas. Besides the Ticha, Silent, and Koprova Valley we already mentioned briefly, other places with active management, wilderness management can be found. After the big windstorm, circa 20 years ago, triggered the awareness that wilderness is a fundamental part of this park. That was an event which actually launched the process where more and more, particularly young people, starts to appreciate spontaneous natural processes and to see how Mother Nature is recovering the forest, spruce forest mostly, which has been impacted by the windstorm and afterwards the bark beetle impact. Thank you. We can see the picture illustrating the area which has been attacked by the wind, later by bark beetle, and the trees has been left, which in a scale which is very unusual and very unique for the Slovakian context. And it was several thousand of hectares where this forest, the timber, has been left over on the ground. This happened because of public protest, and they stopped loggers who was already actually very well prepared to interfere inside this strictly protected area. Doesn't matter if it is nature park or protected area or even the wilderness officially legally protected. Thank you. So that was a few examples from Tatra Mountains, and now let's go to the subject of the specific wilderness area I would like to introduce in this presentation. And that's a Sucha Valley wilderness. Sucha means dry, dry valley wilderness in a very eastern corner of Tatra Mountains. Thanks. We can see on this map where roughly this valley is located according to the European context at the border with the Poland Republic in a very eastern corner of Tatra Mountains National Park, protected since the Second World War. Thank you. So Sucha Valley wilderness is located in the western corner of Tatra National Park. The area is strictly protected since 1993, and the size of this area is currently almost 1,600 hectares, and it covers a mostly undisturbed land with a rich diversity of species typical for Carpathian flora and fauna. This area provides an excellent example of spontaneous rewilding process, as you can see in the coming minutes when I show you the few pictures of this land. Thank you. Sucha Valley wilderness is located in the limestone part of the Tatra Mountains or Tatra National Park with many karstic features, which is very unique, the geological background in the Tatra Mountains, which is for 95% consists of granite or schist. The most famous, the Bear Cave with the signs of bear occupation, is also located inside of this wilderness. The area, specifically in the lower elevation, is densely and diversely forested by the spruce and mixed forest. In a higher elevation, people can find a spruce mountain ash and the dwarf pine, which is also visible on this picture, dominate in this area above the tree line. Lower elevation, however, is covered by mixed stand with beeches, fir, maple, birch, and lindens. In very rare conditions, people can find, or researchers can find also yew, Taxus baccata, reaching age over the 500 years in this area. Thank you. The quiet and uninhabited and very remote area, it's a home for all typical Carpathian carnivores like bear, lynx, wolves, and other game, which found a safe refuge in this otherwise heavily populated corner of Slovakia. It is possible to hear also rare birds like capercaillie or the hooting of a long-tailed owl. Thank you. Wilderness is accessible in this area only along the northern and eastern boundary, using official public tourist trails. To get inside of the wilderness is officially not allowed. And also there is a very missing or very rare local small trails for foresters and for park management. But there are no tourist trails which lead into inside the wilderness. Thanks. Let's have a look a little bit on the history of this area. For centuries, the whole territory of wilderness has been owned by the local landowners association already since 16th or 17th century. Owners strongly influenced the vast majority of the wilderness forest by grazing and logging. So there is a several centuries long, as you can see, the several century long human impact on this area. And despite of that, currently, that's one of a well-protected and very spontaneously naturally rewilding area. Fragments of the mixed forest with a natural species structure and composition has been preserved only inside this area and only in remote corners, in some small fragments of this inaccessible valley. Thank you. Due to intensive logging and grazing in the last centuries, most of the old growth forest of trees has been removed. What we can see, however, because last 40, 50 years almost already, this area is not used anymore by commercial forestry. We can see the spontaneous natural rewilding process, and more dead trees can be found in the area with this continuous spontaneous revegetation. An amount of this dead wood is significantly increased, as I said, particularly in the last few decades. Thank you. Despite of legal protection of this area, there was a period when the area where the wilderness became the threat. Circa 20 years ago, 7 years after wilderness was officially declared, sanitary logging was proposed despite of strict legal conservation. In the territory of 160 hectares of the originally marked wilderness forest become threatened because of this activity. The logging in wilderness was prevented only thanks to the agreement between the local NGO and local landowners. Government, nature conservation officials basically were not involved in this process because in that time that was not top subject for the agenda. So local NGO and landowners found a way how to deal with this intention to log inside this protected area or inside this wilderness area. Thank you. The NGO actually leased the land, 160 hectares, for 40 years and paid in a period of following 5 years, circa 120,000 euros to the landowners. So landowners were really actually happy because there was no need to build a road, there was no need to cut the timber and spend a lot of expenses to get the timber out of this inaccessible area. They got the money, and simultaneously, thanks to the commitment of NGO and their skills to get the money, the area was protected in the context of the concept of the wilderness. This deal satisfied requirements of various landowners, and logging didn't happen in this unique area thanks to this process. Thank you. Thanks to this effort of local NGO, today we can observe that entire territory is subject of strict protection. Dead and fallen trees are left to the natural development without the human intervention. Thank you. Enlargement of Sucha Valley wilderness. There is a potential. There is a strong potential for enlargement of the 16,000 hectares to add additional valley, which is a name Jalovecka Valley. And there is the whole Jalovecka and Bobrovecka Valley in a size of circa additional 2,000 hectares of additional land. It is owned, this valley is owned by the 3 different landowners association. So it requires a lot of negotiation and discussions and obviously resources, how to pay again compensation, because landowners see this area as a potential, not only for logging, but also for tourism development. Thank you. At the bottom of the Bobrovecka Valley, there used to be the old forest road, which has been, however, damaged by the water flash, by flood, circa 45 years ago. Since then, no mechanical vehicles, such as cars, tractors, or motorcycles, get inside the valley. And that means that this valley is actually more than 45 years without any transport. Any cars enter to this valley, only trails, and the foresters and people can walk inside this potential wilderness valley. Land spontaneously, because of no access, motorized access, land spontaneously rewilded and is only accessible for hikers even today. So as you can see, this is a very promising combinations to link existing wilderness Sucha Valley with this potential new additional valley, 2,000 hectares of the Bobrovecka Valley. The issue is simplifying the compromise, simplifying the money and agreement with the local landowners of this land. Thank you. So this was my short presentation. We still have a few minutes left. So if anybody has any questions to this subject, I would be very pleased to respond and answer your questions.
Thank you, Vlado, for this very interesting presentation, very nice pictures, and also really great success story of the valley you were describing and the potential of enlarging it. And we've got 3 questions so far. So the first one is from Isaac. He asks, what is happening after the 40 years, and is the rest of the Sucha wilderness area leased as well? Is the long-term plan to lease the land or buy the land from landowner associations?
You know, officially Sucha Valley has been declared as a wilderness already right at the end of the Soviet communism era. So legally is protected as a non-intervention area. The lease which has been agreed with a local NGO for these 160 hectares was simply because it was the windstorm killing the forest. They found a way and solved the problem in that moment for 40 years. Nevertheless, what is going to happen after 40 years, nobody knows. Officially, legally, area is protected. We hope, and that was also intention of NGO, that after 40 years, the momentum of wilderness will be so growing around and running throughout the Europe that it will be unthinkable that anybody starts to think to go inside a legally protected wilderness with a chainsaw. But practically it's possible any kind of scenario what is going to happen. But now it's clear that for coming 40 years, the area is safe against the chainsaw and bulldozers and tractors. Okay. Okay, and is the plan to lease the land or buy the land from the landowner associations in the future? Depends on the pressure of the developers. Currently, the legal system is guaranteed the no intervention management. Nevertheless, that's actually a role of the NGOs. If something going wrong because of political decision, because whatever can happen, NGOs still can play the role of be safer to save this kind of threat and prevent any kind of the inventions to these valuable areas. I think personally it will be much easier to do it again if necessary, even regarding to raise the money for that process, because history would already happen. There are not so many locations, even inside Tatra National Park, where the 40 years was no human impact and no interventions by chainsaw or tractors, etc. Okay, thank you. Marie asks if there's hunting totally forbidden in the area, and if yes, can you say something to the condition of the woods concerning damage caused by game? Hunting used to be traditional activity for decades, centuries. Since the area was declared officially as a wilderness, a strict reserve, the hunting was stopped. For that, local hunters, they get that kind of compensation, but legally, they are not allowed to hunt inside. If this happens, that's a simply poaching. And that's the role of park rangers, wilderness rangers to care and keep eye on that this is not going to happen. However, honestly speaking, even local hunters, they don't have a lot of interest to hunt there because there is no access. There is a very difficult access, even the hunting trails, all the hunting trails are getting deteriorated. Terrain is very steep, very rugged. So it's not so easy practically actually to do any kind of hunting.
Okay, thank you. Isaac also asks if in the Bovečka Valley, if there any species have been coming back since the land rewilded.
You know, the uniqueness generally Tatra National Park is that we still have originally native population of the all carnivores. Bears, wolf has never been extinct, never, after Ice Age. Never was not extinct in this part of Europe. So we are maintaining the native population of all carnivores, including the herbivores. We don't have Ovis muffin. We don't have the exotic herbivores which approach or get to the other part of Europe. In this part of the Slovakia, in this part of Carpathians, we have basically native population of herbivores and carnivores. High in the mountains in Bobrovecka Valley, there is even good habitat and population of chamois and marmot, yeah, which is a specific endemic or species for Northern Carpathians, for the Tatra Mountains, because that's the most north edge of distribution of these two animals, living high above the tree line. Good.
Oh, that's very nice, thank you. One last question. What will happen when in a few years the lease expires in the valley? Has this already been decided or discussed?
No, you know, the NGO, they are act as spontaneously when needed. For currently the area, Sucha Valley lease is paid and was already paid and is protected for following still maybe 30 years, yeah? So that it's a quite long period where it's more or less safe. And what is going to happen afterwards, that will be even on us, other people which are involved in the wilderness. We have to understand that in a time when this lease was agreed between NGO and local landowners, there was no such strong Europe-wide wilderness movement as it is now. So now there is a much stronger voice for people dealing with the wilderness, not only locally, but especially internationally. And this kind of Wilderness Week, it's another important communication subject which increase the credibility of this process. This is not only issue attractive for few crazy NGO people, but as we can see, that's a Europe, not only Euro-wide, that's a worldwide network of people taking care of this.
Yeah, that's true. Well, nobody really knows what is going to happen in 30 years with the current situation. So let's hope that everything will improve and that we will have more wilderness areas in Slovakia and in Europe.
Yeah, let's hope.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much for being with us and for presenting about the Slovak wilderness.